Before I begin, people on the Zoom room, I'm just handing out some objects to the live audience. My name's Bianca Hester. I'm just going to frame what I've done. I'm an associate professor here at Art and Design. I've just handed out 10 patinaed bronze objects that bear traces of surfaces from Permian epoch plant life and Triassic epoch plant life that I've made in the context of the project that I'm going to narrate now. So for those of you who are holding them, just look after them, hold them, touch them, feel their weight, and we can talk about them later as well if you like. So I'm going to read a script today, and thanks for being here. So since 2018, I've been living and working in the Sydney Basin between Dharawal and Gadigal lands of the Illawarra and the Sydney regions. It is through the context of a set of place-based experiences within this location that the preoccupation with deep time emerged, and through which lithic bodies, the project that I'm going to talk about today, was germinated. And I'll explore this as the case study. I'm going to present a partial narrative about how I became aware of the multiple modes involved in experiencing deep time through a kaleidoscope of embodied encounters with the geologic terrains of the Illawarra. This experience of deep time was intensified through the context of birthing and nurturing a daughter throughout 2018, at the time I moved to the Illawarra, which transformed my perceptions and understandings of place. I will return to this narrative in the middle of the presentation, but for now, let me tell you about the background context for lithic bodies. Lithic Bodies is a project developed over several years with key locations across the Illawarra constituting its core research sites and subject matter, such as the intertidal zone between Scarborough and Coalcliff, where fossilised Glossopteris leaves and a fully intact Glossopteris tree are present, and where the Illawarra coal measures and the Permian Triassic extinction boundary are visible as one of 10 sites globally. This extinction boundary line measures or registers the greatest mass extinction event on Earth 252 million years ago, and is visible above the Bulli coal seam of the Illawarra coal measures, which are the carbonaceous material residues of Glossopteris forests that dominated the area when it was the supercontinent called Gondwana, so-called Gondwana. The coal seam and the extinction line are exposed on the lower reaches of the escarpment, where the ground dramatically changes from Triassic era sandstone, common to Sydney, and beneath the older Permian era terrains of Gondwana. The extinction line is also situated adjacent to and below the Merigong Song Line, which is a significant route between Gadigal land and Wadi Wadi Dharawal country. The coal measures were mined historically and were central to the establishment of the settler economy here in the Illawarra. These extensive coal measures continue to be extracted today from collieries such as Dendrobium Mine and provide thermal coal for the BlueScope steel blast furnace at Port Kembla. And that is actually situated just over the hill from where I live. The material residues, pollution and environmental degradation left in the continuing wake of these industries, such as a burst dam and flooding of a local creek with coal wash in my neighbourhood during COVID, are theorised by Metis scholar Max Liboiron as the pollution that is not simply a symptom of colonial capitalism, but is the violent expression and enactment of colonial land relations on Indigenous land, arguing that colonialism is not a monolithic event of the past, but is perpetuated ongoingly as contemporary evolving land relations. The extinction line and its expanded material field, including fossilised fragments from the Gondwana and Glossopteris forests, occupies a central role in lithic bodies, acting as a key material figure for thinking through the complex entanglements of this location, and becomes a localised example that functions as an allegory for the story of extraction at global scale. I approach the extinction line as a conceptual material loop between past and present epochs, a visceral remainder that bears material witness to climate change in a deep time context, what is written about by a scientist called Vivi Vajda as a global deep time analogue for modern deforestation and diversity loss, and it resonates with the current environmental crisis. Made in place and in company. Engaging with the deep time landscapes of the Illawarra on Dharawal land has involved collaboration with a community of critical companions. This work weaves artistic practice, scientific research, and Aboriginal custodians' guidance to explore a relational concept of deep time, informed by both feminist relational methodologies and Aboriginal philosophies or philosophers such as Mary Graham, who emphasise interconnectedness in place. The key collaborators for the project include curator and writer Bronwyn Bailey-Charteris, who curated the show that's now on downstairs in the UNSW galleries, as well as the public programs that I'll talk about. Geologist Brian Jones from UOW and Solomon Buckman, Tara Jokic from the Australian Museum, Warramai poet Nicole Smead, geographer Leah Gibbs from UOW as well, and the ecologists Leon Fuller and Emma Rooksby. And cultural custodians who are pictured here, Jerinja Ewan artist and educator, Peter Hewitt, and local elder Uncle Peter Button, who's the chair of the local Illawarra Aboriginal Land Council. In particular, Uncle Peter and Peter Hewitt have shared cultural knowledge, guided embodied fieldwork and supported two-way learning throughout the project. Their mentorship, spanning over 2 years, has shaped the project's public programs and continues to inform future engagements. This is an image of a welcome and smoking ceremony at Clifton School of Arts, which I'll talk about shortly. So I've done a little diagram of the project's main components so that you understand the parts that I'm talking about. It was a multi-part project that includes an exhibition at UNSW Galleries, which is still on, and also an exhibition at the Clifton School of Arts, which I see as a parallel project. 2 walking-based performances titled Dust of These Domains, connected to the UNSW site. 3 interdisciplinary walks led by knowledge leaders, and also a symposium that brought the collaborators and critical companions together in a public symposium at the Clifton School of Arts. So the walks that were curated over the time of over October involved walking the intertidal zone at Coaldale, led by geographer Leah Gibbs, the escarpment rainforest ecologies, led by Leon Fuller and Emma Rooksby, and a walk called Sacred Land, which started at Sandon Point in Bulli and led down to Karaji Place near Sandon Point, near Macaulay's Beach, or adjacent to Macaulay's Beach, which is under native title and where the ancient bones of a clever man, or Karaji, were found in 1998 after the epic floods down there. And Uncle Peter is the caretaker of that site today. So the walks offer sensory connections to deep time narratives through diverse knowledge systems associated with the project. And this is just some images of those walks and of Karaji Place. So the symposium that was held at the Clifton School of Arts, where the parallel exhibition occurred, brought together Indigenous and non-Indigenous speakers to address the Illawarra's complex geologic, social and environmental histories. Topics included Aboriginal methodologies of deep listening, colonial legacies through geology and extractive capitalism, and diverse perspectives on climate crisis and how to care for this place in the Illawarra today. The public program series demonstrate an ethos of reciprocity in operation throughout the project's expanded field and methodologies, where time and resources were channeled to activate opportunities for multiple disciplinary leaders to share their knowledge related to a place that they are physically, emotionally and spiritually invested in. These events also represent the reflexive resistance that I've established from within my own aesthetic framework, where the knowledges shared by the critical companions are not captured within the framework of the exhibition, especially the one at UNSW, but instead have been sitting alongside and staunchly independent of it. This has been a tactic to avoid establishing an extractive centre periphery or urban regional dynamic, and instead to lean into multiple modes of engagement at once. Notably, the knowledge shared by the cultural companions Peter Hewitt and Uncle Peter Button was not framed or captured within the exhibitions. Instead, their engagement has guided some of the methodologies in the context of conducting situated fieldwork on country over 2 years, contributing to shaping the overall project and its multiple components. But it expands beyond this too, to influence ways of living with deeper forms of relationality and reciprocity not just as an artist, but as a citizen on unceded sovereign land. And this approach is again informed by Max Liboiron, who asserts that all methodologies are already enmeshed with and enactive of land relations. And so doing any work in situ requires us to enact better land relations with land and people. Liboiron argues that these relations are specific, place-based, and attendant to obligations, rather than a concept that we hear a lot of giving back. They argue for a continuous form of engagement that's underscored by ongoing reciprocity with people and sites of research. So I'm going to go to that personal narrative that I said I was going to discuss. So beginning with the personal narrative on Dharawal land. I'm now going to tell you a personal story about an amalgamation of experiences had in 2018 that have shaped my current work, including breastfeeding my daughter late at night while hearing the distant operations of the coal mine over Mount Nebo, on Dharawal land stolen for the lucrative materiality of its so-called natural resources, seeing the desiccated pile of coal on Google Maps through the glow of my iPhone, realising that my mammalian body, its blood rich with iron transformed into milk, carries evolutionary traces of mineralogy, that the 3 bones of my middle ear, corporeal residues of ancient reptilian bodies, enable me to hear the processing of that coal being extracted from the longwall mining beneath the sandstone escarpment. And that coal exists because of the Glossopteris forests of Gondwana, which once stood where we are now falling almost asleep, and which collapsed during the Permian-Triassic extinction event due to runaway climate change in deep time, an event that is now physically registered as a thin line of shale beneath the Seacliff Bridge. That bridge opened in 2005 because of the hydrostatic pressures surging through the escarpment and causing fatal landslips onto Lawrence Hargrave Drive, and where tourists now obsessively climb the ridgeway above at Clifton to take a selfie to post on Instagram. Below this bridge is a trashed landscape, teeming with the anthropogenic historic waste of the decommissioned Jetty coal mine. And it's a classic shadow place, as theorised by Val Plumwood, one involved in providing the resources for our lives, but which are hidden from view, existing outside of our immediate awareness and sense of responsibility. So these realisations, framed via the visceral experiences of giving birth and breastfeeding, activated a profoundly embodied understanding of deep time for me, living in the Illawarra, not as something abstract, linear, or cumulatively progressive as Western stratigraphy might figure it, but as spiralling, embedded, omnipresent, and registering in the deepest fabric of bodies. It is there both in the geologic terrains that are made particulate and accumulating on the windowsill as coal dust, where I live, as much as in our blood and bone. Deep time splinters through and as the materiality of the here and now, simultaneously conditioning and enabling the fleeting and embodied and ancient moment converging in time, which resonates a little bit with what you were saying, Martin. And it resonates with feminist scholar Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who describes this thinking of time as an understanding of time that acknowledges the presence of all the energy that has ever been. So throughout 2019, while travelling between Wollongong and Paddington on the South Coast train between work and home, I wrote the creative non-fiction book Sandstone, which gathers together fragments that narrate this experience that I've just mentioned of deep time on Dharawal country into a text that I regard as the generative script for the entire Lithic Bodies project, whereby initial research threads have been developed, elaborated and iterated into the current exhibition and public program series. And that's an image from what's on at the galleries right now. The preoccupation with geologic terrains and their material fragments as means to experience deep time relations is evident in the heightened material aspects of the Lithic Bodies project in both the UNSW galleries and at the Clifton School of Arts. This is the downstairs video installation with objects and blast furnace slag. Together they present frottage rubbings of geosurfaces and sculpture made from pressings of remnants of fossilised trees, leaves and coalified wood located in situ on the terrains, as well as from artefacts held in the Paleobotanical collection of the Australian Museum. And 10 people are holding those right now in the audience. Mobilising sculpture. The sculptural objects generated from the collection also have become handheld performance objects carried by participants during the Dust of These Domains reading walking events. This event mobilises the collection and brings it into social and discursive relationship in a contemporary environmental context. The performance functions as a set of lively footnotes that speak to the materialities of the exhibition, as well as the environmental histories of the Paddington ecology, for example, the Busby's Bore that runs beneath us right now, while the objects handled by the walking participants activate forms of tactile presence. I'm experimenting with this as a strategy for accessing deep time narratives by activating physical connections between audiences and the material traces of deep time, inviting people to touch, feel and interact with the artwork in the context of engaging with a dynamic environmental situation beyond institutional settings. So concluding by returning to that visceral night with my newborn, the embodied recognition of deep temporal relations, at once cosmic, reptilian, biologic, colonial, geologic, extractive, mammalian, violent and nurturing, splintering through the materiality of the presently fleeting and simultaneously ancient moment, is one of the prime affects I'm aiming to activate in various ways through lithic bodies by setting up a multifaceted series of engagements that bring into play the aesthetic, relational, discursive and situated, both on and off-site, to bring audiences into forms of experience with the Deeptime Coastline from which this project has variously and relationally been materialised.